Shalom, shalom. This video is about the gospel portion of Parashat Shemot. Shemot means names, name in plural. And it's from the gospel according to Matthew chapter 2 and the first 12 verses there. A thesis should be written about this gospel portion, but I'll be as brief as I can be about it. It's all about the wise man or the Magi who brought gifts to Yeshua after his birth. In the past, I avoided the challenge posed by this gospel portion by rather focusing on the wise men's prayer to find the King of the Jews. And this remains a prayer that we must also pray. But in this video today, I will do a toe-wetting splash in the shallows of a topic that truly requires a very deep dive in order to get to the bottom of the ocean in the meaning of this portion. It definitely is meat. It's not milk food. It is meat to chew on. The link to the Torah portion is in the births of Moses and the birth of the prophet like Moses, respectively. But although the title of Messiah is not found in the Torah portion that we deal with this week, but rather from the end of the book of Deuteronomy, the title of the Messiah is the prophet like Moses, that is. There is a link from the murder of the Hebrew boy children, male babies, in this week's Torah portion to Herod's murder of male children 2 years and younger in Bethlehem, even though that narrowly falls outside of the scope of this gospel portion. Good day, my name is Barney de Klerk. I'm not a Bible teacher. I'm a student of God's Word, and I love sharing with you what I'm learning from the weekly scripture portions. In this gospel portion, a group of Magi came from the east, probably from either Babylon or from Shushan, where they studied Daniel's prophecies. They also studied some other ancient books, and that led them to bring 3 special gifts of honor to the relative newborn King of the Jews. These Magi gave this title of King of the Jews to Yeshua, who was either newborn or maybe a little bit older but younger than 2 years when they arrived. Pontius Pilate confirmed this title of King of the Jews more than 30 years later by bestowing it as well on Yeshua on the cross. Now, I already said the Magi studied Daniel's prophecy. What they studied specifically was Daniel chapter 9 and specifically verse 20 to 27. And it refers specifically, and the Magi's reading of this prophecy should be our guide in understanding all of the book of Daniel. If we understand how they interpreted Daniel, then it's a clue for us how to read Daniel as well. In these verses, the archangel Gabriel comes to Daniel to inform him that it will take 70 weeks before the Messiah will remove transgression and iniquity from the earth through an ultimate sacrifice, and counting from the date that an order will be issued to rebuild Jerusalem. Now, the order to rebuild Jerusalem was initially given by Cyrus the Great, and that was in the year 539 BC. And it was confirmed later by Darius I, and then later again by Artaxerxes in the year 457 BC. It seems to me as if Gabriel's counter started from Artaxerxes' order, which was 82 years after Cyrus gave the initial order. But it seems to me that amongst Bible commentators, the popular vote goes to Cyrus. But in my opinion, the year count makes me favor Artaxerxes' order to rebuild Jerusalem. The 70 prophetic weeks was 70 weeks of years, and that takes 1 day for a year, and then it works out to 490 years. From Artaxerxes' confirmation that was not only to rebuild the walls, or not only to rebuild the temple, but also to rebuild the houses of Jerusalem. If we take that date of 457 BC, we add 490 years to it, it takes us to the year 32 AD. And to me, this date seems to be the date on which transgression and iniquity was removed from the earth. What I mean is, that's the date of Yeshua's crucifixion. Gabriel divided the 70 weeks into 7 and then into 62 weeks. And of course, 7 plus 62 gives you 69 weeks. So the final event is the last week itself. The 70th week, Gabriel said, must be split into 2 halves, 2 3.5 day periods, which corresponds to the tribulation period. So let's consider this. Artaxerxes' order in 457 BC plus 7 years, and that's not what Gabriel said. It's just me. 7 years is 1 prophetic week. So Artaxerxes' order in 457 BC plus 7 years takes us to the year 450 BC. And that is the year in which the Roman Republic was founded. Let's go to Gabriel's words then. Artaxerxes' order in 457 BC plus 7 prophetic weeks of years takes us to the year 408 BC, 408 years BC. And that's the year we read about in Nehemiah chapter 8. Verse 1 to 18, but it's all of Nehemiah chapter 8. It's the year in which Ezra introduced the Bible study format of the weekly Torah portions. That's the way Yeshua studied the Torah and the prophets, and that's the way we study the Torah and the prophets and the Bible today. It was introduced by Ezra in Nehemiah chapter 8, and we still use it today. That's wonderful. In that year, the year 408 BC, it was also the year in which the completion of the reconstruction of Jerusalem was celebrated on Yom Teruah and on Sukkot, as Nehemiah recorded in chapter 8. Yom Kippur is written in between the lines of Nehemiah 8, verse 9 to 12. You read that people cried there when they heard the Torah. So this year, 408 years BC, then plus another 62 prophetic weeks of years will take us to the year 25 AD. The year saw the appointment of King Agrippa and also of Joseph Caiaphas as the high priest. There are some opinions amongst Bible commentators that this year 25 AD is the year in which Yeshua started his public ministry, but maybe this should be taken with a pinch of salt. If you study the Gospels and plot Yeshua's ministry day by day, it informs us of a 70-week-long ministry. So note, it's also not 3 years or 3.5 years. It's only 70 weeks long. And when you compare a 70-week-long ministry at the end of Gabriel's message of 70 weeks of years, it seems to gel together so well. 25 this year, 25 AD, plus the last week, the 70th week Gabriel we're talking about, that takes us to the year 32 AD, the year of crucifixion. Have you ever wondered why the Magi would bring gifts of gold and myrrh and incense? There are different possibilities and speculations, and those speculations are not necessarily mutually exclusive. In my research, what I found is that in the apocryptic book that's called the Forgotten Books of Eden, in chapter 73, verses 1 to 9, it's all about after Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden, Adam asked Elohim for gifts of gold, myrrh, and incense from Gan Eden. And Elohim granted his request, so he received the gifts. Elohim told Adam to give the gold to Eve as a wedding gift. And we still do the same today by means of a gold wedding ring. The ring provides a means to carry the gold, but it also serves as a physical sign of a spiritual bond through the marriage covenant. A physical sign of a spiritual bond in the marriage covenant. Adam, we read in the forgotten books of Eden that he placed the gold on Eve's bosom, so probably as a necklace. And then after a purification period of 40 days, Adam betrothed Eve. He consummated their marriage. Adam and Eve's betrothal was consummated therefore 223 days, that's 7 months and 13 days after they were expelled from the garden. Assuming that they were expelled on the first day of the first month on God's calendar, and then counting from the second day, we count 223 days, we can conclude that Adam and Eve's wedding took place on the first day of Sukkot. And sorry, that's not the first day of the first month, it's the first day, yes, of the first month, counting from the first month to Sukkot in the latter part of the year, 223 days. The forgotten books of Eden says that through Adam and Eve's covenant, Satan was defeated in his war against Adam. And I'm still contemplating the meaning and the reach of this statement. Maybe if you have an insight, you can drop me a comment below this video so that I can learn from your insight. Adam was told by Elohim to give Eve the gifts of myrrh and incense after their union. And so let's look at the spiritual meaning of gold, myrrh and incense. The ultimate noble metal, gold, represents divinity and royalty. It is a suitable gift to bring to the Messiah. As gold speaks of untarnished purity. It certainly is a suitable wedding gift for the bride as well. The bitter herb myrrh was used to anoint the dead. But throughout human history, myrrh has also been used as an antiseptic medication, as a perfume, and in cleaning rituals. Myrrh gum was often been claimed to reduce the symptoms of indigestion, of ulcers, of colds, of coughs, asthma, respiratory congestion, arthritis, and even cancer. Myrrh mixed with wine was widely used in many ancient cultures to produce pleasurable feelings, and it acted as an anti-inflammatory painkiller. Myrrh restores new life, and so the spiritual implication is the destruction of sin and a reawakening to a life of purity. And then, because our prayers rise up like incense in Adonai's throne room, incense represents dedication and worship. And that is the three gifts. Later, Adam and Eve, according to the forgotten book of Eden, Adam and Eve hid these gifts in a cave to the east of Gan Eden. Thought to refer to east of Gan Eden, thought to refer to Nod, the land of Nod, which is in Assyria or in Upper Mesopotamia. Adam and Eve intended these gifts to be brought to the Messiah, who was promised to them by Elohim to come many years after that in order to restore the rift between Elohim and fallen mankind. So Adam and Eve's intent was to give gifts of gold, myrrh and incense to the Messiah. Together with Daniel 9's vision, then the forgotten books of Eden guided the Magi to bring these gifts to Yeshua. In the Bible text, these gifts are never mentioned again though, and I speculate that Yeshua will bring these gifts to his bride when he returns, and he will put the gold into her bosom before giving her the myrrh and the incense after the covenant is consummated. The Star of Bethlehem then has also been the topic of many speculations, as it lured the Magi first to Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem is where you would expect to find the King of the Jews, and then it showed them the way down the road to a specific house in Bethlehem. Note that this was sometime after Yeshua was born. He was born in a stable, but now when the Magi comes, the family lives in a house in Bethlehem. It stands to reason that it was no ordinary star or a pulsar or a supernova in the Mazzaroth. Such a stellar event may have been the event that sent the Magi packing from where they were in the east all the way to Jerusalem. But what happened on the road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem was supernatural. The text actually says that the Magi was glad to see the star again. So we're probably looking at something like a supernova that was bright and visible maybe even in the daytime. And they understood the meaning from the prophecies of Daniel, the words of Daniel 9, and from the forgotten book of Eden, that the King of the Jews, the Messiah, was born. That sent them packing to Jerusalem. But somewhere along the way, that star disappeared, and if it was a supernova, it would have faded and disappeared from their sight. So that's why they went asking, where is the King of the Jews? And when they came out from Herod, after Herod consulted people to tell them that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, they were glad to see the star again. So the star somehow met them outside of Herod's palace and guided them to Bethlehem, all the way south. Well, it's not so far, it's maybe 10 or 12 kilometers. It implies that they did not see the star for some time. That's why they were glad to see it again. And it led them along the road went to stand above her house in Bethlehem, showing the Magi exactly where the King of the Jews was. So we can ask, how can it be? Well, if we look at the Greek text of Matthew 2 verse 10, the star, or as it's called in Greek, Astra or Aster, Strong's word number 792. And then we search in the Bible according to the law of first mention for where was stars mentioned first. And of course that wasn't mentioned in Greek, but in Hebrew, the first use of the Hebrew word of star is actually in the plural. It's Ha-Kochabim in Genesis 1 verse 14 to 19, and that's Strong's word number 3556. And singular Kochav is it's mentioned in the creation week, and the purpose of the stars there, we read Genesis 1 verse 14 to 19, to serve Elohim's calendar as well as to serve his redemptive purposes by dominion over the night. I think the star seen by the Magi may be the same star we read about in Balaam's oracle from the book of Numbers chapter 24 verse 17. Balaam says, a star will come from Jacob, a scepter will rise in Israel. This is the star that the Magi saw. Kochav is spelled Kaf, Vav, Kaf, Bet. And or alternatively, because of the dots in Hebrew, Kaf can be Chaf, Vav is Vav, Kaf can be Chaf again, and of course Bet at the end can be Vet if there's no little dot inside the letter, so it's Vet. Kaf, Vav, Kaf, Vet. And the letter simply apply Kaf as a humble servant bent over, that's the way the letter is written. And Vav is a nail, so because it's Kaf, Vav, Kaf, the humble servant is nailed to another humble servant. But calf also means the palm of your hand. So we have here two calves nailed together. It reminds me of the crucifixion. The letter kaf also represents two other concepts. It represents potential from the Hebrew word kuach, and from the Hebrew word puhel, it means actual reality. It would then be that the vav, the nail, bridges the gap between the potential of salvation and the reality of bringing salvation home to you. The answer, the bet in kochav, or the vet then, is bet is a bite, it's a house, and the star that guided the Magi to the house where they found the king of the Jews, like Puel, the star of Jacob, brings salvation home to you and me. I hope what I said will entice you to read and ponder and chew on the story of the Magi who came from the east to bring gifts to Yeshua the Messiah sometime in the first 2 years of his life. I pray that Adonai Eloheinu will bless you in your search for the truth, and that He will be gracious to you. He has already been gracious to all of us through Yeshua. I pray that He will provide for your every need, and that He will give you shalom. Shalom, shalom.